All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had a great weekend. Hope you enjoyed the holiday. We took a little break ourselves. We've been off the last 5 days, but it's very good to be back, and we have a jam-packed show for you guys today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Summer League debuts from Bronny James as well as Dalton Knecht. After that, I want to get into the Golden State Warriors. They had an interesting weekend. They ended up getting Buddy Hield in a sign and trade to replace that Klay Thompson type of role of movement shooter off the bench. I kind of want to take a look at the Warriors offseason as a whole right now, with Buddy Hield in the picture, Kyle Anderson in the picture, DeAnthony Melton in the picture. What does a Lauri Markkanen trade look like? Is it worth it to include a guy like Jonathan Kuminga in a deal like that? I want to dive into the Warriors offseason. And then at the tail end of the show, DeMar Derozan is now with the Sacramento Kings in a very interesting deal that gets 3 years and $74 million for DeMar, but sends Harrison Barnes to the San Antonio Spurs. I actually really like the basketball fit of DeRozan with Sacramento. We're going to talk about that, but I have some concerns about Sacramento's roster moving forward that we'll get into. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And then keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them throughout the rest of the postseason, or the offseason, I should say. All right, let's talk some basketball. So an underwhelming NBA Summer League debut for Bronny James. 4 points, 2 for 9 shooting, had a couple of assists, couple of rebounds, and a steal. Before we get into any of the actual kind of analysis side of things, I want to just kind of give you guys my impression on Summer League basketball in general. I've been to Summer League the last 2 years. I've always watched Summer League very closely as an opportunity to learn about these prospects as they start playing against other pros. And that's the thing, like whatever you want to say about how much NBA level talent is on the floor when you go to Summer League, these are pros. Most of these guys were, all conference selections when they were coming out of, whether it was they played mid-major basketball, they played high-major Division I basketball. A lot of these guys play professionally overseas. Like, this is a good amount of talent, right? Like, this is a good opportunity to see your favorite prospects play against really talented players. That said, there is a weird dynamic that takes place in Summer League that leads to some really ugly basketball that can make it difficult to learn about these kids. So, for instance, there's a desperation that you see across the board that kind of leads to different results on both ends of the floor. So that desperation is called, I want to be an NBA player. I will do whatever it takes to be an NBA player. I'm going to leave my heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears, everything on this floor to be an NBA player, right? And while there are guys out there that have deals locked up like Bronny James, like Dalton Knecht, guys that are first-round picks, the majority of the players on the floor in these Summer League environments are guys that may or may not be on an NBA roster next year, and more than likely not, right? And so that leads to a certain level of fighting for your NBA life that you see on the court. Now, how does that manifest on both ends of the floor? Well, on the defensive end of the floor, that manifests with crazy level of intensity. Ball pressure, flying around in rotation, guys sliding their feet like they've never slid their feet before, crashing the defensive glass. Like that manifests in a good way on the defensive end. But then on the offensive end, it manifests in poor decision making. So if you're a player that thinks you can shoot at an NBA level and you get a half decent look at a jump shot, you better believe that thing's going up. If you're a guard and you want to demonstrate that you can run second side action at the NBA level, you're going to be coming off of that dribble handoff looking to shoot, right? Like, there are players out there that are natural ball movers that don't know how to play basketball any way other than the right way. But when you mix that with the other half of the guys on the floor kind of hunting their own shot for the sake of trying to demonstrate that they can play at the NBA level, it just breaks that up. It breaks up the flow of the game. Like, again, like you'll see a guy make a nice driving kick that should flow into another driving kick, but he might just jack up a three. Or you might drive and kick and there might be a decent spot up look, but instead of taking it, he might call for a ball screen and run another action and jack up a shot, right? Like, there's just a lot of poor offensive decision making. So how do you beat elite focused, energized defense with quality offense, and you're just not getting that at the summer league level. And so that weird dynamic of desperate defensive effort with desperate yet poor offensive decision making just leads to a mess on the basketball court. So that's the kind of thing that I want us to keep in mind as we're watching. Like Bronny James in particular is a good example of this. Bronny James is not going to be a high volume on the ball creator, right? Like what he's going to be is on the defensive end, he's going to be a primary point of attack defender with length and speed to play passing lanes when he's off the ball. And then on the offensive end of the floor, he's going to be kind of like what Jalen Suggs does for Orlando. And I'm talking about what the idealized version of Bronny James is. Right now, he's not that. But he's going to be a guy as a guard who sets screens on ball handlers and pops to the three-point line and either shoots threes or drives closeouts. He's not going to be a guy that runs a ton of offense. He's going to operate within the flow with other good basketball players. He is a quintessential 3-and-D player who is playing at the guard position as opposed to at the wing. This is not going to be a guy who's going to look good offensively in this type of environment. That said, I do have some concerns. The main one is his jump shot. And I noticed this when we went to the when we saw him at the draft combine. He shot well at the draft combine, but he was shooting a very slow, long load up, kind of a low, kind of drawn out release out in front of him type of jumper. And I was immediately concerned about whether or not when the speed of the game picked up that would be able to translate. I'm not worried about it in the long run. I think it's going to get cleaned up. I think Bronny's going to learn sooner than later, like, I've got to be able to rise and fire quickly in these situations. There's got to be better energy transfer from the floor up through the top of my shot. I think he's going to work all of that out. But I think on the offensive end at the NBA level, he's going to struggle initially getting that quick release and making quick decisions off the catch. That will take some time. And I thought you guys saw that in that first game where, like, even when he would like get to his spots in the mid-range, he'd kind of like just drag out his release a little bit, have a wide open catch and shoot three, but it's just kind of a long drawn out release. That's a piece of what he does on the offensive end that's going to need to be polished up, right? He ended up knocking down one jumper on a pullback dribble, and it was one of his quickest and smoothest releases in the game because he took it a little bit quicker. And I think that's something that we'll see him struggle with, I think, a bit early on. But again, in terms of operating within an NBA offense, he will run some second side action, obviously by virtue of the Lakers running 5 out and him just getting the ball in those situations. But the way the floor is going to be configured, he's going to be a quick ball mover, and he's going to be a guy that sets a lot of picks for bigger players in inverted ball screens and then popping to the three-point line. You guys remember what Derek White did forever with Jason Tatum over the last couple of years, where he'd set the pick, they wouldn't want to switch it, so Derek White would just pop wide open at the three-point line. Those are the kinds of opportunities that you're going to see Bronny get in the long run. So I'm not terribly worried about the offensive end for Bronny in Summer League. On the defensive end, you saw a lot of good and a lot of bad, right? He was beating people to spots. That first possession of the game, that beautiful job navigating the screen, beating a guy over the top to that left side of the screen, ended up taking that contact in the chest. He just got knocked over on that play. For the most part, did a really good job containing the basketball, keeping the basketball in front of him. He got beat on a straight line drive along the left wing in the second quarter of that game, but it was a botched coverage. This is one of those things where if you're watching it and you don't realize what the coverage is supposed to be, then you'd think it's Bronny's mistake. But Bronny was guarding the ball as the player was dribbling the ball up the left side of the floor up to the left wing. Bronny was guarding him squared up, but then he looked over at Colin Castleton and jumped way up on the high side, on the left side of that ball handler. But Colin Castleton had not actually gotten back into his ice coverage yet. And so Bronny was doing his job, which was to funnel him towards the sideline. But since Colin Castleton was too slow to get into position, he got beat off the dribble and it ended up in a layup. That's supposed to be one of those situations where it's a 2-man coverage, not a 1-man coverage. So I didn't think that blow by was necessarily his fault. He did get backdoor cut in the second quarter as well, but then you saw some of his length on display. He was able to recover and get a deflection in there to knock the ball free and recover in time. The guy ended up hitting like a one-leg fadeaway jumper in his face anyway, but he got his length, I thought, was actually impressive for the most part in the game. One of the pull-up jumpers he gave up in his first quarter shift, damn near high-fived the guy, even though he took some contact in the chest just because he has super long arms. And that's the thing, like when you talk about Bronny's size, he is undersized in terms of height, but he does have very long arms, which allows him to functionally play bigger on the wing than his height would lead you to believe. I thought his biggest weak point on the defensive end of the floor was just his strength. There were multiple points in that game where he did like that first play I told you guys about where he navigated the screen, got over the screen, beat him to the spot, but when he took the contact in the chest, he fell over too easily. Now, that one he might have been trying to draw a foul, but there were a couple other plays in that first shift where guys were getting downhill into his chest and he'd beat them to the spot, do his job. But when they would hit him in his sternum, he would go way flying back. And one of the times he was able to get a decent contest, but the guy still made the shot. There was another one where Bronny got knocked like 5 feet out of position, ended up giving a wide open pull-up jump shot. So strength, I think, is going to be a big one for him in the next couple of years, just to put on another about 10 pounds or so of muscle. Because, again, when it comes to cutting off players at the point of attack, there are two phases to it. You got to beat the player to the spot, but you also have to absorb the contact. Like, if you beat the player to the spot, he still has a head of steam. He's still going to run into you. And, yeah, you can try to take charges, but those have a certain level of risk that come with them in terms of whether or not you're going to get the call. And it just is a dangerous play in general. And if he's going to be a guy that's an excellent point of attack defender, he will have to be able to absorb contact in his chest. And so all of this kind of like falls into the same Bronny opinion that I've had since the beginning. Is he ready to play in the NBA yet? No. He's got to make some pretty substantial strides on the offensive end and some pretty substantial strides on the defensive end. But I think we're all being foolish if we don't pretend like there's not NBA tools there. When you watch Bronny run the floor, he's clearly a top-tier athlete. When you watch him slide his feet laterally, he clearly has the potential to be an excellent point of attack defender. You watch him jump a passing lane, you can see that his length and his speed on those cuts is going to be of value. The dude has good touch. You don't go into the shooting drills that he's done and knock down shots at the rates that he's knocked down shots unless you have the touch. He just has to convert his touch into a energy transfer form, a smooth release that he can get off quickly at the NBA level. He just has to turn his natural ability, his touch, into a translatable NBA jump shot, which will take some time. And so all of this comes back to the exact same thing. He's got 4 years in a Laker jersey, contracted. He's going to be able to go take his lumps, take some time in the G League, learn how to play at this level. He's got a long way to go, but I do think NBA tools are there. And, honestly, Bronny's future is to play alongside high IQ players in a small offensive role. That's what he's going to be as an NBA player in the long run. That is an achievable goal for him, I think, with his skill set. And as far as that role goes, the same goes for Dalton Knecht. Like in his first 2 Summer League games, a ton of on-ball reps. And he's capable of doing that at a higher level than he's demonstrated so far. He hasn't shot well in ball screens or in dribble handoffs so far in these 2 games, but he's just not going to be asked to do that very often with the Lakers, at least for the next 2 years or so, the 2 years that LeBron James is under contract and Austin Reeves is on the roster and Anthony Davis is on the roster and either D'Angelo Russell or some other guard who can take usage or wing that can take usage in a D'Angelo Russell trade is on the roster. Dalton Knecht is going to be a cog in a 5-out system that moves the ball quickly and primarily operates with an advantage off the catch, not with a live dribble. And so I'm just not terribly concerned about that. Now, 4 years from now, whether or not Dalton can be a $17 million player or a $35 million player is going to come down to what he can do on the ball. But it's just not something I'm concerned about in the short term. And I'm just more concerned about Dalton on the defensive end than anything else. I did not think he had a good start to Summer League on the defensive end, just getting out of position, committing fouls, just still a little bit struggling to connect some of the defensive awareness with his athletic gifts. And again, Summer League gives you some good info and some useless info, and it's tough to sort through, but we do the best we can. The beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only 2 days the whole year without a game. 2. With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't be any easier or any simpler. Baseball, golf, UFC, there's something for every fan of every sport to bet on DraftKings. And I know it's early, but football season will be here before you know it. And the Kansas City Chiefs are currently the favorite to win the Super Bowl on DraftKings at plus 550. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, let's talk about the Golden State Warriors for a little bit. So the Warriors over the weekend added Buddy Hield and Kyle Anderson. So for Buddy Hield, the idea is obviously that he can fill a Klay Thompson-esque role as a movement shooter off the bench, right? And that makes some sense because Buddy Hield is the poor man's version of Klay Thompson. Indiana used him a little differently. He set a lot of on-ball screens for Tyrese Halliburton, like ghost screens. That was one of the most common actions. Before the Pacers made all their trades, it was like Miles Turner pick and pop with Halliburton, Buddy Hield ghost screens. Those were like the two primary actions that they ran the most. And so Buddy Hield got a lot of reps that registered as like pick and roll man reps because technically he's setting the ball screen and rolling, but he's popping to the 3-point line. But that technically is like an off-screen movement shooter type of role. And then he did do a lot of work in movement shooting situations coming off of off-ball screens as well with the Pacers. Now, and obviously very small sample size with the Sixers, but he did some work in that department as well. Now, to be clear, Klay Thompson is better than Buddy Hield in every way. Klay got 1.1 points per shot attempt on off-screen plays. Buddy Hield got 0.89 on much lower volume. Klay converted spot-ups at 1.08 points per play. Buddy was at 1.01. Klay ran 208 ball screens and got over a point per possession. Buddy ran 89 of them and got 0.89 points per possession. Klay ran 58 ISOs and got 61 points. That's 1.05 points per possession. Buddy ran 18 and got 10. That's 0.56 points per possession. Klay's bigger. He's got a better ability to get to his spots to be an on-ball creator. Klay is a substantially better defensive player. The one thing I'd say that at this point that Buddy does better is he's just a little bit more active on the glass because he's faster, so he can get to some of those like long rebound type of situations, and he rebounded at a higher rate last year than Klay Thompson. But Klay Thompson's a better player than Buddy Hield. That said, Buddy can reasonably fill that role at a heavily discounted price, and that's why this move makes a lot of sense. He is a very natural fit within the Warriors offense. Again, when we talk about the Warriors offense, it's 5 out with a combination of like screening passing fulcrums and movement shooters, right? The screening passing fulcrums, these are all the guys over the years, like Draymond Green, like Kevon Looney, like Andrew Bogut in the early years. Andre Iguodala did a lot of this as well. You know, these are guys that like weren't necessarily dead-eye three-point shooters, but guys that could just be really smart basketball players that knew how to make the right reads as they're operating in space, that knew how to keep flowing into the next action to try to get their movement shooters opportunities. And then accentuating those guys were these movement shooters. And over the years, that's been a bunch of different guys. Obviously, it's been Steph and Klay, it's been KD, it's been Jordan Poole, it's been, some other on-ball guys like Leandro Barbosa and Sean Livingston, right? But at the end of the day, it's like offensive threats coming off of screens and guys who can set screens and then capitalize on attention devoted to the guys coming off of those screens. Kyle Anderson fits magically into that type of role. We're going to talk about him in just a couple of minutes, but Kyle Anderson is just another guy that's a very good decision maker, screen and roll guy who operates out of the middle of the floor. And then you've got Buddy Hield as another movement shooter. And Buddy Hield, by the way, also just brings 3-point volume. He took 7 3-point attempts per game last year combined in the two destinations and shot 39% on them. So just kind of adds that influx of 3-point volume to try to replace some of what Klay Thompson brings to the table. Now, as I said, these guys have their issues, but I like these additions because neither guy should be in their core 5-man lineup. When you look at these moves through the lens of being like fringe, like outside of the starting lineup, guys who are like your 7th or 8th man, when you look at them through that context, they actually make a ton of sense. Like Buddy Hield has his issues. He's not an efficient on-ball creator. He's at his best when he's being set up with an advantage. Klay Thompson was a better on-ball creator than Buddy Hield, obviously. But he's undersized. He's a mediocre athlete. But he's perfectly fine as a rotational bench guard. And he is a very natural fit within the offense, which should allow you to maximize what you get out of Buddy Hield. Kyle Anderson has his issues. Smart defenses dare Kyle Anderson to score the basketball, and he can struggle with that. He's a bad jump shooter. He's a mediocre mid-range pull-up jump shooter. He's okay, like just barely over 40% in like hook to floater range, that like kind of short range area. He shoots just 52% on layups. So like, yeah, he's got his issues, but he's an excellent defender with a lot of versatility. He was actually the best defender guarding Luka in the Western Conference Finals last year. He's a really smart playmaker. He's actually one of the best assist to turnover guys in the league, 4.2 assists to just 1.2 turnovers last year. Really good decision maker in the middle of the floor. He's a quality rotation piece. These are guys that as long as you don't need to close games with them, they can really help you. And on nights when Buddy Hield has it going and maybe DeAnthony Melton isn't playing as well, Buddy Hield is an option there, but you don't need to go that route. These are guys that you're not depending on for massive roles. You're depending on them in bench roles. And within that context, I really like it. So the Warriors this summer already have bolstered their rotation with a quality starter in DeAnthony Melton, in my opinion, provided that he's healthy, and 2 good rotation pieces. And I've talked about this extensively, but I love DeAnthony Melton's game. If he's healthy, he's your starting 2 guard. And so then you start to look at their best lineups and you go, okay, Steph Curry, top 10 player in the league, DeAnthony Melton, bona fide, really good high-level starter at the 2 guard, Andrew Wiggins, bona fide, really high-level starter at the 3, and Draymond Green, who's one of the best defensive players in the league. That's a good core 4 to have in terms of your core lineups. Now, the question is, who's that 5th guy? Now, in the short term, it's probably Kuminga, right? But Steve Kerr has been on the record that he doesn't love the idea of Kuminga and Wiggins playing together. They're 2 inconsistent shooters. They don't have a lot of feel for the game from those 2 spots. And that's the most important thing when we talk about Kuminga is like the fit is a little clunky in Golden State because this is a 5-out offense where read and react and quick decision-making, quick quality decision-making is vitally important. And that's one of Kuminga's biggest weaknesses right now. That's why I love the Kyle Anderson fit. Say what you want about him. He's an excellent decision maker who will operate well in 5-out. As we look at, as I talked about through the Warriors' history, that type of player has been so very important, right? So this is where the Lauri Markkanen rumors come in. Because Kuminga is that 5th guy to me, is the odd man out. He's the one guy that like is going to cause that lineup to fail reaching the level on both ends of the floor that it needs to reach. Now, to be clear, before we go any further on Lauri, the Warriors might just not have enough to get Lauri Markkanen. Like if a team like the San Antonio Spurs decides that they really want to put their best offer together, they'd probably win that bidding war. So the question is, should the Warriors consider including Jonathan Kuminga in a potential deal for Lauri Markkanen? And I think the answer is very clearly yes. And so I'm going to make the case for that now. I have 3 reasons why. 3 reasons why I think the Warriors should include Jonathan Kuminga in a deal for Lauri if that's what it takes. Number 1, Jonathan Kuminga has all-star upside, but he does not appear to have superstar upside. I'm a big believer in Jonathan Kuminga. He's like a truly transcendent athlete. Talked about this a lot last year, but nobody can keep him in front when he makes quick lateral moves out of the high post when he's attacking with a triple threat or even out of the post. Like that was why he was so successful in the post last year. That's why he drew so many fouls, because he was getting defenders out of position. He's an intriguing defender with a lot of upside. I like him a little better on the ball than off the ball right now. I think he'll have multiple seasons as an NBA player where he averages over 20 points per game, and I think that he'll probably make an all-star team at some point. But he has not shown what Jonathan Kuminga has clearly not shown to this point is that multifaceted dominance that you typically see from foundational superstars right around this point in their careers. You see flashes of it, and we did not see that with Kuminga. In my opinion, Jonathan Kuminga's absolute ceiling, like the best player he could be, would be what Jaylen Brown has become. And that is a huge compliment. Jaylen Brown just won a Finals MVP. But Jaylen Brown is somewhere around the 15th best player in the NBA. That would be an absolute monstrous success story for Jonathan Kuminga. I think it's more likely than not that he doesn't get to that level. But that is his upside. Jaylen Brown is not the franchise cornerstone that the guys at the top of the league are. The guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic. Jonathan Kuminga has no shot at cracking that tier, right? And so with that being the case, like, I don't view him as like a can't miss type of asset. Number two, Lauri Markkanen is also not that type of guy. He's also not a cornerstone type of talent. But he's much further along in his development than Kuminga, and he's a much better natural basketball fit with the Warriors. Lauri Markkanen's not going to be a top 10 guy. He's not going to enter into conversations with Luka Doncic and Joel Embiid and those guys at the top of the league. But he's much further along. He averaged 25 points and 8 rebounds per game in his last 2 seasons with the Utah Jazz. 49% from the field, 40% from 3, 89% from the line, 64% true shooting percentage. 25 and 8 on 64% true shooting. You would be thrilled if Jonathan Kuminga became that. Lauri Markkanen is already that. And I know it's not a perfect player comp. They're very different types of players. But in terms of value to a franchise, you aspire that Jonathan Kuminga might be able to become as valuable around the league or as good as Lauri Markkanen has been as an NBA player the last 2 seasons. That would be a quality outcome for Jonathan. And so you're just getting someone that fits more within the timeline. And then he's a beautiful fit within the Warriors offense. He's an excellent spot-up guy. He converted spot-up possessions at 1.10 points per possession last year. Good movement shooter. He shot 45% coming off of screens last year. That's 1.11 points per shot. He's a great cutter. He's a great pick and pop big in ball screens with Steph Curry. That would be deadly. He's a high-level read and react player in 5-out. He is just a much more natural basketball fit with the Warriors than Jonathan Kuminga. And then the third reason why you'd have to include him, you have Steph Curry on your team. And you're not planning on trading him. So stop focusing on what some of these young players can be and give Steph as much support as you can because you owe that to him. And Lauri allows you to do both. Lauri allows you to give real, genuine support to Steph Curry in the short term while also having an asset for the long term of the franchise. He's 27 years old. He's got a lot of great basketball left in him. To be clear, if I actually thought that Jonathan Kuminga could become a foundational franchise cornerstone type of prospect, then I wouldn't even consider having this conversation. But he's not. Like, if he's not like a perennial MVP vote getter, then it doesn't make sense. And again, I understand from a different perspective if you don't have Steph Curry on the roster. You don't trade, like for instance, if you're the Utah Jazz and you're looking for your franchise cornerstone and you have Kuminga and you want Lauri Markkanen, that doesn't make any sense because Lauri Markkanen's not that guy either. You're better off betting on Kuminga's upside and maintaining whatever other assets that you have. The Warriors have Steph Curry. The Warriors have Draymond Green. The Warriors have a certain obligation to try to make this work. And that to me is where you have to consider this type of deal. Here's my last note on it before we move on. Lauri gives you a clear 5 to start and end games with. Steph, DeAnthony Melton, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Jonathan Kuminga, clunky, not enough shooting. Not enough high IQ players on the wing. Steph, DeAnthony Melton, Andrew Wiggins, Lauri Markkanen, and Draymond Green, plenty of shooting, plenty of guys that know how to play read and react 5-out basketball on the perimeter. That 5 has the upside of a championship team. I wouldn't put him at the top of that tier, but like I'd put him up in the rest of the Western Conference at least. I'd put him up there with, every team that's below that Denver, OKC, Boston tier. They're just as good as all those teams if they get Lauri Markkanen. And then anything could happen. Who knows? Maybe Steph does get back to MVP level next year and you become a championship contender. Maybe you do have the ability to make a smaller move on the margins at the deadline to push yourself up another level. But Lauri Markkanen is the only guy that can put you into that conversation. If you keep Jonathan Kuminga and you go with Steph, DeAnthony Melton, Andrew Wiggins, Kuminga, and Draymond, you're a play-in team. So, I mean, here's the thing. It's possible that Lauri Markkanen is just outside of Golden State's price range, but if you have to include Kuminga to make a deal like that happen, you include it. No question. I'm just personally, as a basketball fan, I'd love to see it. All right, before we get out of here, let's talk DeMar Derozan to Sacramento. So the full deal. The Kings get DeMar Derozan for 3 years, $74 million. The Spurs get Harrison Barnes, an unprotected 2031 pick swap from the Kings. And the Bulls get Chris Duarte and 2 second-round picks in cash from the Sacramento Kings. So I want to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. I want to start by looking at it just in terms of the fit. I love the backcourt fit for DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox. I'm actually much higher on it than most of the people I've seen talking about the trade since it happened. I think he's a natural fit in the Kings offense. The Bulls ran a lot of similar 5-out concepts that Sacramento runs. Like they run a lot of like Chicago action where DeMar Derozan will be coming off of a pin down in the corner into a dribble handoff. They run a lot of like other screens that flow into dribble handoffs. They run a lot of 3-man action where they'll like ram screen for Caruso to come up and set a ball screen and just try to confuse switching. They'll ram screen for Vucevic to come up and set screens. Like they run a lot of modern 5-out concepts, and DeRozan's just going to naturally be a shoe-in fit in that Kings approach. Now, Sabonis can't shoot the way that Nikola Vucevic can shoot, but he's still a really natural fit with DeRozan as a screening partner. DeRozan was one of the best half-court shot creators in the league last year. 1.05 points per possession in pick and roll, including passes on over 1,200 reps. 1.15 points per ISO, including passes. That was number 1 out of the 11 players in the league to run at least 400 per synergy. 1.11 points per post-up, including passes. That ranked 3rd out of 22 players to run at least 250. So he was unquestionably, in terms of efficiency, one of the best half-court shot creators in the league last year. And here's the thing. In terms of the off-ball fit, he's still not a great three-point shooter, but he did have the best three-point shooting year of his career last year. It was the first time in his career he attempted at least 2 threes per game and made at least a third of them. He shot 43% on unguarded catch-and-shoot jumpers, 1.16 points per shot. That was the highest mark of his career to this point. If he's wide open, he'll knock it down. And so, I actually think that the offensive end is a really natural fit. And I think that that's going to look pretty almost immediately. And I think the Kings, as an offensive team in the regular season, got a lot better as a part of that deal. Now, the defensive end is where people are going to be concerned, right? DeRozan is a guy that, leaves a lot to be desired on that end of the floor. You preferably have to tuck him on a low-usage player off ball, right? But I have long thought of De'Aaron Fox as the type of guy who has the capability to make an all-defense team. And that if he has the energy to really commit to that end of the floor, I think he can be a dominant defender. So here's the thing. If DeRozan can absorb usage to lighten De'Aaron Fox's workload so that De'Aaron Fox can take more of a two-way approach and devote a lot of resources to guarding the other team's best guard, I think this could work really well. The defensive end is only going to be an issue if De'Aaron Fox wants to try to conserve energy on that end of the floor. But as long as that partnership works out to free energy up for Fox to commit to the defensive end, I think that could fit really well. Where I get concerned about this deal is the loss of Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes is not a star. He's 12 points per game, although he's always been really efficient with the Kings. He's consistently been over 60% true shooting, but he's not a volume scorer, not a lockdown defensive player, but he is a rock-solid forward in the NBA. I'm actually really excited about his fit with Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs. They suddenly look like a very competent NBA roster going into next season with the inclusion of Harrison Barnes, with the inclusion of Chris Paul. Like that's going to be a really fun team to watch next year. And to put it simply, if Victor Wembanyama plays at a top 5 level, that could be a playoff team that we're looking at there. But the Kings are suddenly very thin at forward. And I like Keegan Murray a lot, but I look at him more as a 3. Is Trey Lyles going to take that role? Is there another trade in the works somewhere? Because, this was a front line that already left a lot to be desired on the defensive end of the floor, and you let go of Harrison Barnes. So, again, this move to me felt a little bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, but I like the backcourt fit naturally. And so my kind of view on this at this point is I'm going to hold off judgment on the Kings and the DeRozan move until we see the rest of the offseason. Because if they can make a move to anchor that forward spot, I'll feel a lot better about the fit. I just need to see what they do the rest of the summer. All right, guys, that is all we have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We got another show coming tomorrow where we're going to talk some Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Rookie of the Year stuff. We're going to talk some Team USA. And then I'm going to be taking a day off for traveling to Vegas for Summer League. We're going to have a reaction to the Team USA Canada scrimmage on Thursday morning. And then on Saturday morning, we'll have a breakdown of Bronny James' debut and Dalton Knecht's debut, Alex Sarr, all those guys that play on opening night in Vegas. I'll have a reaction to that on Saturday morning. And then we'll go into Monday to break down the rest of Summer League. That gives you a little scheduling update for the rest of this week. As always, I appreciate you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.